Hey folks, you back again. It is I think it's the 29th of June 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check. Call my cell phone. What is it? Yeah, 29th of June. So a little past 9:30 a.m. and I'm out here in this open space preserve. You can see around me. Been coming out here for a while now. I mean, I built my Eagle Scout project up here. I'm actually sitting at it, and I think it's a good place for me to come to kind of reflect on various things in life, because metaphorically and literally speaking, like this location and this whole structure that I built, if you can see that, and there's the table, it literally and figuratively represented to me, like, being at that threshold, being at 18. I was 17. You get to get the project done before you're 18, but, I was 17 going on 18. And it was kind of like, being at the threshold, going off into adulthood, adulthood with all those like childhood and adolescent dreams and hopes and expectations and whatnot, and then kind of being confronted by harsh reality and the fact that like things aren't as they seem. You really got to work for success and so on. And today, for instance, I did put together like a resume for a couple of staffing agencies in the Southern California area, and my plan is to, when I get home, to go hopefully the computer, to go home. I mean, when I go, sorry, when I get home. When I get home, the plan is to go to the computer, print out the resume, and then go and turn these resumes into those places, and whatever they need me to do, or they need me to do some background check or like a drug test or whatever, to get the paperwork for that, and then within this week or like early next week to have that stuff done and turned into them, and get the ball rolling on that, because their job is to basically just find a temporary or part-time job or even full-time job for whoever. They're kind of like the headhunters, and whatever companies have a position, they go to those guys and say, hey, we have this opening here, can you find us someone to fill it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever, and I can at least get some money in my pocket and get going on that. So there is that I'm doing today. But as I kind of like guess kind of made it obvious, starting off this video, I know it's not really a plan per se and kind of off the cuff, but what I really wanted to discuss today was something that's really been on my mind for a while. And it's kind of like if you go back on my earlier videos, like a while ago, I really started dealing with some emotional pain and trauma from the past that was directly related to my PMO addiction at the time. So that, sexual escapism. And I, in many ways, came to terms with that. But, as I think I mentioned somewhere, it's probably on some live video chat, 24/7 Betterment or someplace like that. But, I'm of the opinion, and I've actually kind of, you could say I've gotten this idea from this guy Shadow Grave, that NoFap is really just it's a subset. It's a subset of like a greater addiction to fantasy and escape and things of that nature. And in particular, I'd say things like the internet, video games, anything that allows you to really exercise escapism to it, to an extreme. And for me, if I were to like really like try to come up with an example that was specific to what I'm talking about, relevant, the example that I would, that I would give that holds like the greatest like emotional weight to me is the example of growing up as a Star Wars fan. And this may seem odd, strange, funny, what have you, but My experience with Star Wars, like I remember seeing Empire Strikes Back on VHS first, and then I was kind of confused as to what the plot was and who this character was and how they knew each other. So I finally like somehow figured out that okay, it was A New Hope was first, then Empire Strikes Back. I think it was probably because they had episode 4, 5, 6, on the actual VHS case. I figured out what the Roman numerals were, and I was like, okay, I should be watching this one first. And from then on, I became really hooked on Star Wars, and it was something about being that age and being able to really suspend my disbelief and not just go, oh, this is just some film someone made. They videotaped some people in costumes and they were talking, reading off lines, or memorized these lines, and then were just kind of muttering them off to each other, and this is just special effects and whatnot. I was able to really like get into that whole storyline and the universe and whatnot. And then after I saw those movies, I got into the various expanded universe novels, video games, computer games, and it just became like an all-encompassing experience, and I was just obsessed about it. And around the time that I was 13 or 14, it was like 1999, so I think I was, 13, episode 1 came out, and for the longest time, as a Star Wars fan, I'd wanted to like have Star Wars movies in my lifetime. Have actual like had the experience that previous generation had going to the theaters and seeing that first major blockbuster, summer blockbuster with New Hope, and then having Empire Strikes Back come out, having Return of the Jedi come out, and I wanted that experience, and I got to have that, but there was somewhere along there that I think it was because I'd gotten into pen and paper RPGs and creating my own characters. As a fan, I really wanted to like escape from this mundane reality and be in the Star Wars universe, and it was kind of like that sort of the point of departure in a sense. And given that that obviously never happened, and I felt kind of misled about things, perhaps to a certain extent my parents, because I mean, I don't hate on them. I really don't. They helped me. They helped me make a Star Wars costume. They helped me make Star Wars props. They, even to a certain extent, helped me like make my attempts at a Star Wars fan film here and there. It never really like came together for various reasons, but just that whole experience, not really per se being against my parents. I want to make that clear, but just the whole experience of like realizing or learning that the film industry is an industry, it's a job, it's a business. Um, it's not real, it's fake, it's a fantasy, and you can't just be part of it because you just want to be a part of it. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things that kind of caused me to have a serious amount of disappointment with life, and I've carried that with me for the longest time. That and just pretty much any other franchise that I would have wanted to be a part of, like Lord of the Rings, the Matrix series, just that whole overall like escaping into the fantasy land of a film or a movie series that I wanted, and I know I'm not alone in this. There have been 1,000 million billion other people, what have you, who have wanted to do the same thing, and unfortunately, they didn't get to. They weren't fortunate enough to, and I wasn't fortunate enough to. Whether or not it was because I didn't have connections or I didn't have the training, what have you. My life wasn't set up that way. I didn't make the right decisions, whatever the case may have been. But it feels like in many ways, whether or not with the internet, video games, computer games, my various attempts at like making movies or creating video games have all been like centered on this attempt to escape to that realm, where I could experience being a hero, being the hero with 1,000 faces, to borrow that term from Joseph Campbell and his work on the subject, which ironically enough inspired George Lucas in creating Star Wars. But it's like I've wanted to have that experience, and I've gotten into so much escapism, and I've let it like influence so many of my decisions in life and things I wanted to do and my perspective on things and such, that like, for instance, trying to become a military jet pilot. Some part of me wanted to see that as, and this is like kind of embarrassing to put it lightly, but some part of me wanted to see it as, you know, living the closest thing to being like an Imperial TIE pilot, you know, from Star Wars, or you know, the whole astronaut thing, closest thing to becoming, you know, a space pilot or a starfighter pilot, you know, from Star Wars or any others, you know, those sci-fi series, Battlestar Galactica or whatever. And, you know, that's all fine and well to a certain extent, but it's kind of like, you know, when you're confronted by the reality of it, it's kind of like you have to make your peace with it, and you have to really have the right approach in order to succeed at that, and you can't be treating it like it's some game, because, you know, it's real life. And, you know, for instance, a military jet pilot, I mean, you could be in a dogfight, you could be shot down and, you know, behind enemy lines and that kind of thing. It's not a game, you know, it's real life. And that sort of struggle to really accept the reality of things, contend with them, and make the best of them. You know, like I said, I think one of the biggest sources of it has been that whole like Star Wars fandom thing, and wanting to be in the movies, and then realizing you can't just because you wanna, and because you're an expanded universe fan, and you've created all these characters, and maybe they are great characters, maybe there's great storylines, but it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, like, you're not the owner of Lucasfilm, whoever they happen to be, you know. You're just some kid, you're just some guy, and you gotta deal with it, you know. And so much of the time, like, I get this nostalgia and this frustration with these sorts of things, but it's part of life, and I'm really not sure exactly how I'm going to overcome it, make my peace with it, that sort of deal, because there's always that part of me that wants to hold on to those dreams, hold on to those ideas, hold on to those feelings, and never really just settle into the sort of what I would consider a cynical, materialistic, nationalistic, whatever, you know, political, mundane, shallow, or, you know, to use very derogatory terms, but, you know, looking at it from as mundane and shallow sort of perspective on life. Always wanting to dream and hope and believe that I truly can become something great, and that I can live out those childhood dreams that, you know, maybe other people also had, but they either, you know, failed at or gave up on or what have you, wanting to be one of those people who actually, you know, didn't, you know, and actually accomplished that thing. So, you know, and obviously some of these dreams were unreasonable, you know, like wanting to be the first person on Mars. I mean, there's no real way that I can actually make that to be the case, especially with the nature of things as they are, you know, as they presently stand, both in my life and just in the world in general, and as well just how that whole process works. You know, like, you can't say I'm going to be the first one to do X, you know, necessarily. You know, you only have so much control over that. But anywho, it really feels good to get it off my chest, and probably make a follow-up video to that later, to this later. But yeah, that's me realizing what really much of the source of all this stuff is. So anywho, I'll see you folks around later. Bye.